The third area, the economy. The first question on the economy is the following. The leader of one of the other parties in Ontario has announced support for a policy euphemistically called right to work. Discuss your thoughts as a potential Ontario Liberal MPP on this policy. I will first call upon David to start the discussion on this one.
I don't know if the adjective I heard earlier was crazy or stupid, but it pops to mind. I come from a business background. I'm very sympathetic to business interests. I've been there, I've done that, I've employed people. This notion is absolutely ridiculous. The union movement uses the expression, the race to the bottom, and I think this is our greatest possible opportunity to do just that. When you look at, and I'm going to appear to take a side trip, if you look at the pension situation, not just in Canada, but across the world, around the world, what is saving our CPP, our public pension system, are the pensions that have been negotiated, the benefits that have been negotiated by labor. And the impact of anything that we do to undo those agreements, we are going to pay for as a population. This isn't about being pro-labor or anti-labor, this is about being pro-us. We want strong unions, we want strong unions with strong pensions because it serves all of us, and it's probably right now the greatest protection for the Canadian pension plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next will be Batu. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. This right to work concept, we've seen it at play for probably about 15, 20 years in the southern United States or jurisdictions in the southern US. And what we've seen is, sure, there's a possibility they may be creating jobs, but what type of jobs are you creating and who are you competing with? Basically, you have a situation, well, let's take an example, Boeing. Boeing airline company, in terms of their new Dreamliner airline, they've got a operation in Washington State where the workers there have unionized benefits, and they have an operation in Georgia, which is a right-to-work state. So what they've done is now Boeing's in a situation where they're engaging in negotiations with the union in Washington State and saying, well, listen, if we don't come to an agreement with you, we're going to ship it down to this right-to-work state. Well, what do the workers in Georgia have? They get a reasonably good wage, sort of, kind of, but they don't get pension benefits, so they don't get health care, they don't get any of the other benefits that you would see as part of a properly negotiated union contract, which is what the workers in Washington State have. So basically what corporations are doing in terms of their political involvement south of the border is encouraging state legislatures and politicians to pass all this right-to-work legislation, drive down wages, and eliminate costs such as having to pay for pensions and having to pay for health care costs and so on and so forth. Mr. Hudak wants to bring that to Ontario. Mr. Hudak says he can raise, create 1 million jobs over a certain time period with that. If you drive down the wages, low enough, sure, you can compete with Mexico or overseas countries with regards to that. But what sort of quality of life are you going to have? The quality of life that we've had here in Ontario has been based on good wages as well as good benefits. And, a large measure of that success and quality of life is due to a viable and strong union movement. So, it shouldn't surprise anyone that Mr. Hudak obviously wants to take away powers from unions and weaken them and make them non-existent. So, this is another stupid idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Batu. Harvey, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, certainly I agree with the comments so far. But I think it's an interesting study that we can take a look at. It's, as an advocate, as a lawyer, our court system is based on 2 strong cases being argued before a trier of the issue, and 2 strong cases coming out somewhere in the middle with a just decision. In that similar way, capital and labor have to both be strong so that agreements made will come out somewhere in the middle, that it's not going to be bad for capital, it's not going to be bad for labor either. We all have to benefit from our system of, the economic system we all operate under in this province. And it benefits all of us. It doesn't just benefit the unions or capital, but the strong tendencies of both to work together to a just result benefits everybody. And the question, as Bitu was saying, who are we competing against with right to work type of legislation where unions are pushed out? We don't want the lifestyle that emerging economies are struggling with now. We have a lifestyle that we want to protect and secure. And doing away with union management operations is no way to protect the lifestyle that we all value in this province. Thank you.
Thank you, Harvey. Sophie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The union movement is under attack by both the federal and now the provincial Conservatives. As far as I'm concerned, there is no replacement for collaboration, and it's unacceptable to communities that are certainly to the labor movement that to have this imposed on them. I think that as far as a political strategy is concerned, it's a nightmare for the Progressive Conservatives, and that's a good thing for this party. I think that we need to be able to negotiate. We need to be able to work with each other and not impose this on our unions. It's a nightmare. That's it.
Thank you again, the candidates. The second question then for the economy is the following one. The Kingston area economy depends heavily on public sector employers and the tourism industry. The Ontario government has significant influence on both these sectors. As the potential Kingston MPP, what policies do you support to help keep the local economy strong? And for this one, we'll start with Bitu. Sir, the floor is yours.
Two subject areas. With regards to the local economy, studies have shown that up to 75% of Kingston's economy, excuse me, is based on public sector work associated with the federal and provincial governments. Obviously, legislation or policies that would reduce the number of civil servants or try and drastically shrink the public sector would have an adverse effect on Kingston's economy. So I'm obviously not supportive of any of those initiatives. More importantly, with regards to tourism, one of the challenges that we face in the tourism industry is, of course, the cost of the Canadian dollar. And a high Canadian dollar certainly potentially helps foreign tourists, particularly Americans coming across here. It gives them more bang for their buck. Unfortunately, it adversely affects our manufacturing sector. We need to develop ways to be able to continue to make Kingston a very attractive place with regards to tourism, taking into fact that the dollar is on the decline, which will help our manufacturing sector, but may pose additional challenges for tourism. I think one of the things that we need to focus on here in Kingston that we are uniquely qualified to focus on is heritage tourism. Certainly on my time when I was on the KEDCO board, we tried to emphasize, what makes Kingston unique from other places around the world, and certainly the heritage aspect that we have here in Kingston is something that we need to foster. I think the federal and provincial governments can do a lot to help with regards to that. We know that the provincial government is responsible for the operation of Fort Henry, while the federal government actually owns the assets. But I've never understood, for instance, why we don't have any educational programs or summer programs that encourage young people to be able to spend some time here in Kingston during the summer learning about the Canadian history that's so alive and vibrant here in Kingston. You hear stories about these programs happening in the United States and other jurisdictions. We have a world-class university here that can provide educational support with teachers and other experts in the field. There's no reason why we can't have programs like that established here in Kingston. So that's certainly one of my many ideas on fixing Kingston's economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Bitu. Harvey, the floor is yours.
Can you just read the last part of the question? What the actual question?
Yes. As the potential Kingston MPP, what policies do you support to help keep the local economy strong?
Okay, thank you.
How's that?
What policies? Well, it is true that we do have a large public sector employment base in Kingston. And that has been in jeopardy in the past, and municipal councils have done what they could, and to a large degree successfully, to prevent the loss of public sector jobs in our community. When the base was going to be closed, I know Pittsburgh Township pulled out the stops to make sure that costs to the base that could be borne by the municipality were offered in order to save the base. And that was done, and now CFB Kingston is the largest by personnel base in the country. We have a huge economic driver in CFB Kingston. So I would make sure that we can foster collaboration among various organizations within the community, both public and private, to keep jobs here, both public and private. In terms of of tourism, of course, Kingston has a huge tourism market, but it's something that we can't take for granted. It's something that we have to foster and further develop. We need to harness the full potential of Fort Henry and the Rideau Canal. These are the only World Heritage Sites in the province of Ontario. The provincial government has not done enough, I think, to advance and promote that particular asset that we enjoy. Kingston had a plan for a deep water port. We could encourage river cruise, the river cruise industry, as is done in Europe, using the Rideau, the Ottawa River, and the St. Lawrence as a route for cruise ships. But we do need a deep water port in Kingston. So policy would be to seek help to build a deep water pier in Kingston.
Thank you. Time there has expired. I call on Sophie now for the next.
Thank you. In terms of which provincial policies I would support, since my experience is primarily federal, I apologize, I don't have a specific policy that I can pick out and identify, but there are some areas that I know that we need to work on. For example, we have the situation in Kingston with KP and what to do with that building. There are many people who have had their eye on KP and they would like to open it up for tourism permanently. There are many groups that have different interests. There's a sailing school, there's the Thousand Islands tours that need to go through, that are going through there now when there's an opportunity with one of the fundraisers that they're doing. And I think that we need to support, the provincial government needs to support projects as they come up on a project-by-project basis. It's critical that the government be open to looking at these opportunities as they come up. Corrections needs to go through a series of processes by which to dissolve their interest in KP, and it's during that process we need to make use, or we should be able to make use of that property. There's tremendous benefit to be gained from that. So my comment would be that we need to be able to work with all levels of government to access any opportunities as they come up, and I'm using KP as one primary example. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Peter. Marion and I had the opportunity to live in Munich for 4 months, and one of the treats in being there was going into Hauptbahnhof in downtown Munich and looking for the Tourism Ontario posters that were posted up. It was a little bit of a touch of home while we were away. Now I noticed that all of them were the GTA, so certainly I think the provincial government has a role to play in promoting local tourism, as Harvey said, with the Rideau Canal system, Fort Henry, in promoting attractions like that around the world. I know we have at least one municipal councillor here, and I suspect if she were asked what provincial policies might benefit the local economy, it would start with the heads and beds tax. I think Mark Gerritsen would feel like half his workload disappeared if he actually got some movement from the province on that file. And I think it's one that's going to take continued attention. I think one of the key things for the next MPP, and I'll come back to the Drummond report, however much of the Drummond report is acted upon, it's going to cause a restructuring, a major restructuring of the provincial government. That is the thrust of it. And Kingston, of course, becomes vulnerable in that sort of restructuring. So I think one of the key roles of our next MPP is to protect the interests of Kingston and the islands through that restructuring. Thank you.
Thank again the candidates. We have now the 2-minute response session from each for the discussion on the economy. And so I will start with Harvey on this one. The floor is yours, sir.
Well, I think enough has been said about the right to work and how obviously dismissive we've been about the possibility of that entering into a discussion at all, into the discussion. But going back to some of the things that were said concerning the nature of our economy in Kingston and what we could do to, what government policy would be important to protect it. The problem, one of the major problems is there's no real coordination between the federal and the provincial governments in the area of tourism. And both have a huge part to play in this. There has to be some coordination, there has to be participation, cooperation in this very important area for our community. Sophie was talking about KP. That's a prime example. The federal government, when it declares that property surplus, it doesn't go anywhere but to Canada Lands, who are charged with the duty of maximizing the return to the federal government of that property in terms of sale, redevelopment, whatever. It's not to promote any sort of policy of government, either the provincial government, local government, or the federal government, but simply to make money on it. And that's a mistake. It's a great opportunity, and we have to make sure that governments cooperate to realize of those opportunities that are important to communities, like the KP in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Harvey. The floor, Sophie, is yours.
Thank you for supporting my position that the different levels of government do need to cooperate with each other. It's one of the key things that I think that we need to do to take advantage of these opportunities as they come up. And I think that that should be our primary focus. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. David, the floor is yours.
I understand this is the opportunity to respond to other comments, but I'd actually like to bring up a whole new area under the economy. I was hoping that one of the questions that would come up would be around minimum wage and livable wage. At the outset, I commented on, as we all know, the growing gap between the haves and the have-nots. And I think in terms of what we mean to being liberal, what our view is of liberal, I think it will be tested in the discussion of what we do with a minimum wage versus a livable wage. The Premier appointed in the last summer a commission to look at establishing a procedure in Ontario to set the minimum wage and to keep it updated or to review it. But I think we get into interesting questions about whether minimum wage should keep a full-time worker in at the poverty line, as is now the case, or whether it should be more. I don't know the answers to that, but again, I think as a liberal community, we need to spend some time thinking about that.
Thank you. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you. In terms of two other ideas with regards to the Kingston economy, one of them, which of course will require the involvement of senior levels of government, and David's already mentioned this with regards to infrastructure investment. The province is committed to $35 million of new infrastructure investment. The real important thing is to make sure that that investment has maximum multiplier effects and spin-offs. We know that we have a gap with regards to municipal infrastructure, which I'm sure across the country is quite massive, and certainly in the province it's quite a large bill as well. Infrastructure investments, if they're done properly, have the ability to stimulate the economy and grow the economy and have multiplier effects. So if we're going to be spending $35 million, we should make sure that we spend this $35 million on the right investments, and hopefully make sure that they actually have the multiplier effects that maximizes improvements throughout the economy. The second thing you can do with regards to Kingston's economy, and I think this has probably been said before by other experts, is that you need to protect small and medium-sized businesses. Small and medium-sized businesses are the ones that are located in communities and hire people in the community. Large corporations generally look at things from either a national or an international perspective, but small businesses are based in the community. Their livelihood is totally dependent on how well the economy of the local community is going, and if you make it easier for small and medium-sized businesses to be able to do their job, then of course they'll be able to hire more workers and encourage more economic growth that way. And you know that the money that you spend at those businesses, more often than not, will actually be recirculated in the Kingston economy as opposed to going outside of Kingston. So we need to make sure we have policies that actually encourage growth of small and medium-sized businesses, make it easier for them to do what they need to do to hire more workers and employees locally, and that way we can see a positive spin-off in the Kingston economy, ensure that the monies and funds stay in Kingston. Thank you.
Well, I thank all the yes candidates for their response to these questions, and that concludes the question part of the meeting.